Good afternoon. I've been studying how stakeholders respond to organizations' sustainability and CSR practices for well over a decade. And a lot of my earlier work was focused on understanding the positive outcomes for companies, like competitive advantage in attracting talent. In more recent years, when I'd present these findings, I'd often get a bit of a sneer from someone in the audience, along with a comment like, well, they're just doing it to look good. Rather than push against that voice, I started to ask, what's that all about? What I've come to realize is that CSR can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can inspire loyalty and trust, but on the other, it can also lead to skepticism or even backlash. Communicating CSR efforts is tricky. If the intentions aren't clear, stakeholders might respond with suspicion rather than support. And perception often eclipses reality. So it's not just about what companies do, but how people interpret those actions. And that interpretation can significantly affect a company's reputation. The perceived sincerity of CSR can make or break its impact. Authenticity fosters trust, but doubts can damage reputations. And this leads to a paradox. Genuine efforts to drive positive change can sometimes be met with skepticism or mistrust despite their good intentions. It's like trying to be eco-friendly, only to find out that the process used to create your new green tote bag had a carbon footprint the size of your house. And just like these everyday paradoxes, businesses face a similar challenge with CSR. Imagine a company investing millions in a groundbreaking environmental initiative, only to have its reputation suffer or stock prices drop. What went wrong? Why do some companies face backlash despite their genuine efforts? Today, we're exploring why, despite those best intentions, CSR efforts can lead to mistrust and criticism, revealing a paradox that organizations have to navigate carefully. So let's look at why CSR can seem like a double-edged sword. It's not just about whether companies are doing good, but how these efforts are perceived by stakeholders. Stakeholders reward companies that engage in socially and environmentally responsible practices through purchase behaviors, employment choices, or investment decisions. And there have been numerous studies finding evidence that CSR results in favorable responses from stakeholders, like recruiting or employment outcomes, organizational attractiveness, or employees' commitment to the company. Research has also shown a link between an organization's CSR and its financial performance, and most of that is attributed to positive stakeholder responses. So the good news is, these positive outcomes resulting from CSR are becoming well established, which can help organizations see the benefits of engaging in CSR and continuing to invest in it. Surveys of employees post-pandemic have reported that about 90% believe companies should lead with purpose, must have a positive impact on society, and benefit all stakeholders. And companies have responded in kind. But here's the twist. As more companies engage in CSR, expectations rise. A little more than 10 years ago, only 20% of S&P 500 companies reported on their CSR efforts. And by 2019, that number had skyrocketed to 90%. And with this shift comes increased scrutiny and growing expectations from stakeholders. People are seeking purposeful actions from companies instead of just talk. With the rise of greenwashing, CSR washing, corporate scandals, stakeholder trust is dwindling. In an era of reduced stakeholder trust in institutions and leaders, how can companies navigate this new reality? When CSR goes wrong, it's not just about greenwashing. It's about genuine efforts that unexpectedly draw criticism. And surprisingly, there's very little research on why good CSR can backfire. A study I published in 2016 with Dr. David Jones at the University of Vermont found that about 1/3 of job seekers in the sample reacted neutrally. So CSR didn't really have a significant effect on whether they were attracted to a certain employer or not. And a few job seekers were actually repelled by descriptions of a company's CSR, citing reasons like skepticism or cynicism toward the firm's environmental or social initiatives. Hot off the presses, this summer in my research lab, we did an extensive review of all of the literature published to date on stakeholders' negative reactions to CSR. We included studies that actually measured responses rather than inferring it from large databases or other indirect data sources. And here's what we found. We located a total of 64 studies. Almost all of them focused on consumers, about 75%. Some of them looked at employee reactions, and then very few looked at job seekers, investors, or the broader community. We found patterns of skepticism, lower purchase intentions, negative attitude toward the company and the brand, and even active responses like boycotts. So there's a bit of a CSR communication conundrum. People need to know about CSR practices in order to respond positively to them. But studies have found that awareness is often quite low, even among an organization's own employees. So how do you balance making your CSR known while avoiding the trap of criticism? And here's another fun fact. The reality is that people's perceptions of CSR often matter more than the actual initiatives themselves. Even with good intentions, companies can face backlash if those efforts are seen as misaligned or inauthentic. So we need to try to align perceptions and reality. And research suggests several ways to bridge that gap. One way is to ensure a strong company cause match. So it would immediately make sense to people why Home Depot might sponsor Habitat for Humanity, but maybe a little bit less so if they sponsor the Heart and Stroke Foundation. Both great causes, but the match is clearer in the first case. Another important aspect is to avoid message incongruence. So several years ago, I published a series of studies with Dr. Kate White at UBC, looking at messaging like Philip Morris's Think, Don't Smoke campaign, which effectively positions their CSR as telling people not to consume their own products. You can guess how that turned out. When people had time to actually think about that messaging, they reacted negatively, not just toward the campaign, but also the company and the overall impression. There may also be ways to leverage what's called information source credibility. Basically, the source of CSR information can affect how people respond to it. They likely respond more favorably when they hear about a new community initiative through a third party like the media, rather than a company's own PR department. And it's also important to note that the reasons people believe a company engages in CSR, or the perceived motives behind it, matter significantly. Whether those motives are seen as self-serving or other-serving makes a difference. But stakeholders don't expect companies to act purely out of goodwill. Research shows that strategic motives like attracting talent or boosting employee engagement are valid, as long as the company is transparent about its intentions. In fact, highlighting both social and business interests can increase credibility and reduce skepticism. So with all that in mind, a critical linchpin appears to be authenticity. Authenticity is about being true to oneself, aligning actions and behaviors with core values and beliefs. CSR authenticity then means seeing a company's CSR efforts as a genuine reflection of its values and commitments. When CSR is perceived as authentic, it can lead to enhanced reputation, consumer trust and loyalty, and employees who identify more strongly with the company. In contrast, inauthentic CSR can result in reputational damage, distrust, and wasted resources. Recently, colleagues and I conducted interviews with leaders of nonprofit organizations that are the intended beneficiaries of corporate CSR initiatives. We wanted to learn more about their experiences of CSR authenticity. And these conversations revealed 4 key themes. The first was genuine concern for the beneficiary's cause or mission. And this might look like having a high level of interest or involvement with the cause, or a long-term commitment to the CSR partnership. Alignment or fit with the company and the nonprofit's mission was also part of how they experienced authenticity in CSR. And this often, but not always, occurred when the sponsor was locally based, because their shared community and shared goals were more apparent. They also spoke about the importance of relationship or partnership building. So for example, having personal interactions, whether those are formal or informal, and co-creation of the process and implementation of CSR. And the fourth theme was giving hands-on or tangible in-kind support, maybe having employees volunteering at the nonprofit's events, or providing pro bono expertise. These insights gave us a deeper understanding of what authentic CSR looks like from the perspective of those who were directly impacted. So while many stakeholders reward genuine CSR efforts with loyalty and support, there's a crucial but often overlooked reality. CSR can backfire. And the paradox, even well-intentioned initiatives can lead to skepticism and negative reactions if they're perceived as inauthentic. Authenticity isn't just a nice to have, it's a critical factor that can shield your company from reputational damage and foster deeper trust. And this area of research is still developing, and we're only scratching the surface. But as CSR becomes more integral to business strategy, understanding how to communicate and implement it authentically is more pressing than ever. Prioritize authenticity over visibility. Ensure your CSR initiatives are rooted in genuine values, not just for public relations. It's better to engage in fewer deeply aligned efforts than to spread resources across a bunch of superficial ones. Engage stakeholders in co-creation. Involve them in the design and execution of CSR initiatives, whether it's employees, community leaders, nonprofit partners. Giving them a voice makes your efforts more credible and relevant. And communicate through trusted third parties. So for example, partnering with respected media outlets or nonprofit organizations to share your CSR story can lend credibility and avoid the perception that it's just self-serving. Understanding the paradoxes and perceptions at play and striving for authentic CSR is the key to building trust, seeing more positive outcomes for the company in the long term, and creating lasting change.